So today we're talking about something that touches every single area of your life, self-regulation. More specifically, how well or how poorly your nervous system is able to stay balanced in a world that is changing faster than ever before. You know, right now we're living through an unprecedented convergence of upheaval, economic uncertainty, societal polarization, accelerating climate crisis, mass migration pressures, culture shifting AI technology that's literally rewriting jobs, relationships, and even how we think. And that's just a short list. You know, the pace is relentless. And science is warning us that our current civilization faces serious systemic risks within the coming decades. And so facing an uncertain future weighs heavily on people's minds. You know, we're forced to make big life decisions, career pivots, where to live, how to raise kids, how to stay healthy in the middle of constant instability. And in times like these, the ability to regulate your nervous system isn't just a nice to have, it's survival. You see, the less regulated you are, the more reactive, overwhelmed, foggy, and exhausted you become. And the harder it is to think clearly, make wise choices, or even enjoy the good moments that do still exist. In contrast, the more regulated you are, the more grounded, resilient, and intentional you can stay no matter what's happening out there. So, what exactly does a regulated versus a dysregulated nervous system actually look like? Well, I'm going to show you now on something that I've drawn up earlier. So here we've got my Stickman, which is regulated. All right, and this is characterized by things like relaxed shoulders, steady posture, calm, even breathing, stable emotions, you know, has feelings and feels emotions, but doesn't get necessarily hijacked by them. Clear thinking, able to respond thoughtfully instead of reacting. Good, clear flow. So not necessarily wired or not necessarily drained, but just in that midline. Open, connected vibe. You know, can be present with anyone in the room and themselves. In contrast, if we flip over to someone, my dysregulated Stickman here, all right, some characteristics could include tensed or hunched shoulders. You know, how many people do you see walking around like this? Shallow, fast breathing. You know, they're not doing a deep belly breaths, they're breathing through the chest. Emotions, by the way, emotions are just energy in motion. So emotions swing hard. You know, people who are quick to anger, you know, anxiety, or alternatively, they shut down or are in numbness. Reactive, you know, the smallest of triggers can set them off. Scattered thoughts, brain fog, racing mind, and very often exhausted yet wired at the same time. They're often closed off energy, you know, defensive and disconnected. And we can all feel when someone walks in a room who is dysregulated, really affects your energy field. And these people are constantly adding unnecessarily misunderstanding, tension, conflict, and stress to relationships, work, health, and literally everything in between, compared to someone who's regulated, who moves through life with intention and ease. And here's the thing, most of us are actually walking around somewhat dysregulated and we don't even realize it. We just think it's normal adult life, you know, feeling on edge, snapping at people we love, procrastinating, lying awake, ruminating, or feeling flat and disconnected. You know, we've normalized chronic low-grade stress, anxiety, irritability, or exhaustion. Why? Because most of us were simply never taught how to regulate our nervous system. You know, our parents weren't taught either. You know, they were doing their best in their own dysregulation. You know, so, you know, from years of coaching, I can tell you that the majority of adults are carrying some level of chronic dysregulation. And it's not a character flaw, it's a skill gap. And thankfully, it's thankfully, it's one that we can close. So what is self-regulation really? Well, self-regulation is simply your ability to notice what's happening inside. Thoughts, emotions, body sensations, impulses, and then gently guide them so that they serve you instead of running the show. It's the foundation of real freedom. Because when you're regulated, you can feel a strong emotional rise and, choose not to let it hijack you. You can shift your state, change your perception, move your body, breathe differently, and come back to calm, clarity, and intention. Your thoughts, feelings, and actions become conscious choices instead of knee-jerk reactions. And that's huge, because if you can't regulate over time, your emotions and impulses start running your life, and you end up mirroring other people's moods. Reacting to every trigger and living from survival mode rather than from conscious choice. Self-regulation is the base layer superpower. Everything else, influence, creativity, spiritual connection, high-level service, builds on top of it. So how do you know if you're struggling with regulation? Well, let's do a quick check. Over the last month, have you been overly intense? Angry or, frustrated, and that flares faster or bigger than the situation calls for? Have you experienced frequent anxiety, stress, sadness, or shutdown that lingers on for too long? Do you self-sabotage, get in your own way, procrastinate, or create unnecessary drama? Have you experienced a racing heart, shallow breathing, tight chest, or feeling wired but tired a lot? Do scary looping thoughts or negative mood keep showing up? If several of those feel familiar, your nervous system is likely spending too much time in survival mode. And that's okay, because awareness is the first step. So before we get into what actually works, let's be honest about what doesn't. The common habits people reach for, thinking that they're calming down, but they quietly keep the nervous system dysregulated. And number one is endless social media scrolling or doom scrolling. You think you're zoning out, but the negativity, comparisons, FOMO, and blue light, spike cortisol, dysregulate dopamine, and keep you in a hyper-vigilant state. Number two, playing fast-paced action or competitive video games. It feels like an escape, but the adrenaline, sensory overload, and frustration mimic real threats, elevating heart rate and delaying calm. Number three would be binge watching intense TV, news, true crime, or horror. You're trying to unwind or distract, but graphic content and emotional roller coasters trigger fight or flight, heighten baseline arousal, and leave you wired. Number four, drinking alcohol to take the edge off. A few drinks suppress the system temporarily. Then rebound, anxiety, wrecked REM sleep, dehydration the next day, cortisol spikes, all leave you more dysregulated. And number five, excessive venting or ruminating on problems. It feels like processing, but replaying stresses sustains arousal, reinforces negative pathways, and prevents you from being regulated. And these are the traps that most of us fall into, and really do explain why so many people feel like they're trying everything but still can't get calm. So with that said, what actually works? Well, now that we've cleared the air on what keeps us stuck, in the rest of this video, I'm going to walk you through the main causes of dysregulation one by one, and right after each course, I'll give you some clear practical solutions so that you can start moving back towards regulation today. So let's get into it. And so I want to look at the biggest everyday drivers of dysregulation and really start to address them one by one. And we're going to go through the physical ones first, because when your body feels safe, your mind follows. Then the environmental inputs, and finally the mental and emotional layers. And these aren't just fluffy tips, they're high leverage evidence-based shifts that thousands of people are using every day to turn the dial from survival mode back to calm and presence. So let's dive in. So the first one of these is poor or insufficient sleep. You know, sleep is the absolute foundation. It's when your nervous system does its deepest repair. You know, processing emotions, resetting cortisol, balancing fight or flight, and rest and digest. You know, when you're getting less than 7 to 9 hours or the quality is poor, you know, fragmented, shallow, interrupted, then none of that happens fully. Cortisol stays high. Your prefrontal cortex, the adult brain that manages impulses, weakens. You know, your threat radar, your amygdala, gets hypersensitive and vagal tone drops. So what happens is you wake up wired but exhausted, reactive, foggy and irritable. And even 1 or 2 bad nights can mimic moderate trauma level stress on your system. And chronic sleep debt creates a vicious cycle. You know, dysregulation makes good sleep harder and poor sleep deepens dysregulation, leading to burnout, mood swings, weakened immunity, and, you know, just feeling like you're always behind. So the solution, well, protect your sleep like it's a non-negotiable medicine. You know, treat it as your #1 nervous system reset ritual, because it is. And so I want you to aim for 7 to 9 hours of sleep. You know, start 1 to 2 hours before bed. Dim the lights, you know, red amber bulbs or salt lamps. Cut the blue light or put your iPads and stuff on night mode or wear blue blockers. No caffeine after midday, no heavy meals or alcohol close to bed. You know, building a calming down winding routine, you know, a warm shower, gentle stretching, physical book, you know, journal worries to offload them, or 5 to 10 minutes of slow breathing, you know, 4-7-8 or box breathing, you know, keep the bedroom cool. You know, so many of us sleep in warm bedrooms, but 16 to 19 degrees is optimal. Keep it dark, quiet, use blackout curtains, earplugs. You know, try to keep the same sleep wake time daily, even on weekends, to anchor your circadian rhythm. If your mind races, do a brain dump, you know, before you go to bed. And practice progressive muscle relaxation techniques. And really track how you feel after better nights, you know, so you get an idea. Also, magnesium glycinate or camelline tea can help. You know, within days or weeks, you'll start to notice easier emotional regulation, lower baseline stress, sharper focus, and faster recovery from triggers. So guard your sleep fiercely, because it really is the quickest way to build safety and resilience. Okay, so next we have shallow or chest-based breathing, which is what I call stress breathing. And this really is one of the most common and direct ways dysregulation sticks around. You know, when you breathe fast and high in the chest instead of deep belly breathing, your brain hears danger. Stay alert. Your sympathetic nervous system fires. Heart rate goes up. Cortisol and adrenaline elevated. Oxygen inefficient. CO2 buildup. And what you get is a feedback loop of anxiety, tension, dizziness, fatigue, panic. You know, most of us default to this under chronic stress. Hunched over screens, you know, holding breath. We're tense, stuck in the belly. And it understimulates the vagus nerve, weakens heart rate variability, which is a great marker for resilience. And it blocks parasympathetic calm, even without external stress. The breath patterns keeps you wired or exhausted. So the solution is to retrain diagrammatic and coherent breathing and physiological side. First, build the baseline with coherent breathing. 5 to 6 breaths a minute. You know, sit or lie comfortably with your hands on your belly. Inhale through your nose for 4 seconds, the belly expands, chest quiet, and exhale or purse lips for 6 to 8 seconds. Belly draws in. Pause for 2 to 4 seconds, and then repeat it for 5 to 10 minutes, 2 to 3 times daily, or anytime you're feeling tense. And you can anchor this to mornings, you know, meal transitions, whatever you like. Or for an instant reset, the physiological sigh, which is developed by the Huberman Lab, outperforms many of the techniques. And all you're simply doing is inhaling deeply through the nose at 89% of your lung capacity, belly out, followed by a quick second inhale through your nose, a short sip to the top, of no exhale in between, then follow that with a long, slow exhale through the mouth, longer than the inhales. A gentle sigh until empty. So it looks like this. And you just repeat that for 1 to 3 cycles to provide the instant calm, because your heart rate drops, tension eases, and clarity returns. And you can do it seated, you can do it standing, eyes open, closed, anywhere, anytime when you're feeling wired or anxious. Remember that these are your master switches. Turn off survival, turn on restoration. So make them non-negotiable and results will come fast. Next, we have a lack of movement / mobility. Sitting for hours or only doing high intensity exercise without mobility creates stored tension, tight fascia, restricted joints, shallow posture, reduced flow. The body signals not safe to move freely, keeping sympathetic, guarding active, and vagal tone low. Interoception weakens, you miss early stress signals, and the result being fatigue, stiffness, irritability, brain fog, poor regulation, feeling stuck, physically and mentally. So the solution to this is daily mobility and somatic style flows to regulate the nervous system for both body and mind, emphasizing fluid, joint focused movements that release stored tension, improve proprioception, and signal safety without high intensity, such as cat-cow to downward dog transitions, or hip circles, or low lunge flows, or 90-90 hip openers, spinal waves, and progressive squat-based patterns done in mindfully in short 5 to 15 minutes movement snacks to decompress the spine, hips, and restore range of motion, enhance circulation, and really shift you from a place of sympathetic dominance to parasympathetic calm, whilst fostering mental presence and resilience. And one great exercise to start with is to do a supported deep squat using a wall or block if needed, while adding slow thoracic spine rotations, twisting your upper back side to side. That is a great one that I recommend everyone to do. And because this really targets the posterior chain, lubricates the hips, knees, and ankles, and decompresses the spine and builds mental presence through stillness with movement, helping to discharge freeze responses and also restore body-mind safety. So, morning, 5 to 10 minutes mobility flows, cat-cow, spinal twists, hip circles, shoulder rolls, neck undulations, gentle yoga, qigong, tai chi, or somatic practices, slow mindful range, barefoot nature walks, grounding and natural gait resets posture and vagus nerve. So dynamic stretching also, or joint cars to lubricate and wake proprioception. Also, have like a midday break, if you're sitting down all day, an evening wind down release. Remember to breathe deeply, exhale and a stretch for parasympathetic boost, and listen to your body. But in saying that, you want to aim for about 20 to 40 minutes most days of fluid exploratory motion, and in the following weeks you'll notice reduced bracing, better HRV, easier emotional regulation, more energy flow. So just remember that mobility, daily nervous system reset helps you to shift from contracted to open and alive. Okay, so the next thing that keeps us dysregulated is a toxic media diet. So constant graphic violence, such as horror or true crime or 24/7 bad news cycles, feeds perceived threats, because your brain doesn't fully separate fiction from reality. And so it triggers fight or flight, which again means spiked cortisol, heart rate, hypervigilance. Desensitization and chronic activation means harder calm, primed anxiety, irritability, exhaustion. So the solution is to guard your mind with intentional boundaries. Try a 1-month break from cable, Netflix, Hulu, replace it with books, uplifting podcasts, gentle content, nature documentaries, comedy. Sustainable, limit intense negative media to 15 to 30 minutes a day, and in the morning only if you have to. Turn off notifications. Choose nourishing alternatives. Replace screen time with grounding, deep breathing, nature walks, gratitude journaling, body scans. Track your feelings. If it drains, wires you, pause it for a week. Please, mindful consumption reduces chronic activation, and it rebuilds peace, capacity. Small shifts equals safer, more balanced nervous system. Next is blue or artificial light exposure. LED screens, energy bulbs emit high blue light, which suppresses your melatonin and tricks the brain clock into daytime, which keeps your sympathetic subtly activated. So evening exposure equals delayed fragmented sleep. Next day fatigue, irritability, brain fog. And if chronic, ongoing low-level stress and poor regulation. So the solution, simple. Minimize blue light, maximize natural warm light. During the day, aim for 10 to 30 minutes of morning sunlight with no sunglasses to anchor the rhythm. In the evenings, 2 to 3 hours pre-bed. Dim the lights. Warm bulbs, 2700 K or lower. Red, amber, salt lamps, candles. With your screens, put them in night mode. Blue blockers early. Work near windows. Circadian rhythms are important. Okay. Next is nature. A disconnection from nature causes it. Being indoors or screen life cuts ancient grounding rhythms like sunlight, earth contact, natural sounds. So your body stays in low-grade threat. Again, high cortisol, disrupted rhythms, no soothing inputs. You're stuck in fight or flight or freeze or shutdown. High cortisol in freeze drains energy clouds thinking. The solution again, I sound like a broken record, daily nature connection, grounding, sunlight rhythms. 20 to 30 minutes most days. Barefoot walking on grass, sand, earth. It all lowers inflammation and cortisol. Morning sunlight, can't emphasize enough, 10 to 30 minutes with no sunglasses again, there you go, lower cortisol. Resets rhythms, shifts freeze. Sit and lie on the earth, listen to the birds, wind, water, breathe in sync. Gentle movement anchors. If you're in an urban area, think local parks or even your balcony. Just get outside. Constant exposure equals lower cortisol, higher vagal tone, reduced freeze, easier calm sleep, and resilience. Nature is a non-negotiable medicine. Your body remembers regulation here. You are nature. So get out there. It's why I live among the trees. You walk into my backyard, all I have is trees and nature animals. And I walk out there and I'm in bliss. And so should you. So next we have a processed food or junk diet. Wow. Where do we start? So ultra-processed foods spike and crash your blood sugar. Cortisol, adrenaline surges. Inflammation via seed oils, additives disrupt the gut-brain axis. Less serotonin, GABA, more inflammation. And once again, this creates a loop of anxiety, irritability, brain fog. Fatigue, which leads to stress eating, deeper dysregulation. Low protein is a big one, equals poor neurotransmitter production, which negatively affects your mood, stress, alertness, relaxation chemicals. The solution, guys, eat real whole foods, nutrient-dense foods. The first action is protein-dense meals. Aim for 20 to 40 grams per meal. Eggs, fish, grass-fed meat, poultry, legumes, Greek yogurt. This supports neurotransmitter balance. It stabilizes your blood sugar. Center on veggies, healthy fats, moderate whole carbs, but cut out the sugars, the refined grains, the seed oils, artificial additives, killing you. Add fermented prebiotic foods, bone broth, collagen for your gut. Balance meals every 4 to 5 hours. Hydrate. Magnesium-rich foods helps regulation. Make small swaps or challenge yourself to do a 7 to 14 day reset and you'll find calmer energy, mood stability, less reactivity in the following days and weeks ahead. Because when you feed safety or nourishment, your nervous system relaxes into repair. So next is a lack of somatic awareness. stored tension in the body. And this is a little different to the lack of movement cause of dysregulation, as it's more about the fact that all of this, head living really disconnects us from our body signals, as opposed to simply tension in our bodies from a lack of movement. And this is really important because stress or trauma habits store tension. So think tightness, bracing, frozen postures, constant danger signal equals sympathetic guarding or shutdown. Symptoms equal pain, numbness, reactivity, stuck feeling. No release equals no full calm. The solution is daily somatic exercises, gentle, curious practices for 5 to 15 minutes. Body scan, soften on exhale, orientating scan safe environment, pendulation, shift tension to neutral, shaking release, which is where you discharge energy, cat-cow, spinal waves, mobilize fascia, vu humming, which is vagus stimulation, bilateral chest tapping for calming overstimulation, cold vagus exposure, a bag of ice in the back of your neck for 1 or 2 minutes, slow breath for instant calm, slowness plus no forcing. Do these things and notice reduced tension, better regulation, deeper presence, because when your body lets go, natural balance returns. So next we have a lack of clarity in life as a main source of dysregulation. No clear sense of self, wants or direction mean unsettling drift. Midlife job loss, empty nest retirement, uncertain world, AI economy, all amplify the fog, which leads to insecurity, anxiety from blurry path. The solution is to seek clarity deliberately. Pause often and ask yourself, what matters here? What's the next on a step? What do I want? What feels fulfilling? There's no 100% certainty needed, just enough for the next step. So caution, avoid locking into negatives. I'm too old, I'm not enough. So choose positive, but maintain flexible clarity. I can grow, I am worthy. I can shape what's mine. Keep a regular notebook or journal to increase, or help to reduce reactivity and build safety and confidence. Next, we have self-limiting beliefs. 95% of our daily thoughts and behaviors run on autopilot from deeply ingrained programs that we picked up over time, and 70 to 80% are negative. Beliefs like, I'm not good enough, I'll never succeed, chip away joy, vitality, and reinforce threat, scarcity, and they all fuel dysregulation. So the solution is to catch, challenge, and reframe. Notebook negative thoughts. I can't, I'll never. And then question them. Ask yourself, are they 100% true? Is there evidence against? What would I tell a friend? Reframe them to, balance and open, such as I haven't yet, but I can learn. So use daily empowering affirmations and also pair it with grounding and breath. And in the weeks, you'll notice increased optimism, lighter energy, and a safer nervous system. Next, we have unhealed trauma and wounds, which all stick your nervous system in survival. Think hypervigilance and shutdown. Chronic anxiety, numbness, reactivity, trust issues, symptoms from the past, protection. It's all involved. And the solution is gentle body first healing. Seek trauma-informed support, somatic experiencing EMDR, polyvagal therapy, daily safety signals, slow breath, rocking, humming, orientating, co-regulation with safe people and pets. Also, as I suggested earlier, somatic mindful movement, pendulation, grounding, think consistent rituals, warm light, soothing sounds. Have patience, small steps rebuild vagal tone, widen tolerance, and restore calm and connection. Next, we have trying to control the uncontrollable. I think many of us are guilty of that. Gripping outcomes, people, future, it all equals resistance, perceived threats, pathetic overdrive, exhaustion, and eroded trust. The solution, control what you can and release the rest, please. Just pause. Ask yourself, is this mine to control? If yes, then take small action. Boundaries, breath, choice. But if the answer is no, then surrender and repeat this phrase. I release this and I return to my influence. Anchor with your hand on your heart, belly, slow breaths, exhale tension. In your daily reflection, note what you control well and what you let go of without resentment, because that reduces threat. It rebuilds agency and safety and flow. Next, perceiving things as negative. Rigid negative labeling fuels chronic threat detection, rumination, anxiety, and shutdown, and eroded resilience. The solution? Reframe it for opportunity and higher order. And you know what? Shakespeare said it best, and he said that nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Accept pain, surrender resistance. I'm in the right place. All is as it should be. And ask yourself, what does this make possible? What is the hidden lesson of growth? Really adopt a growth mindset. Every experience is your teacher. Choosing responsibility over victimhood equals calm empowerment, reduced threat, deeper peace. Next, we have disconnection from true self and or love, absence of love. That is, forgetting essence as love source equals ego, mind, duality, fear, not enough, death. Unsafety, disconnection from love, which is our ultimate regulator. So the solution is to reconnect. Heart-centered living, daily hand on your heart, slow breath, feel gratitude, love for 3 things. Journal on these questions. Who am I really? What is the purpose of life? And affirm to yourself, I am love, I am safe, I am whole, I am living authentically. Drop the judgment, prioritize presence, relationships over fear pursuits. And as you do, you'll find that duality fades, beauty and unity is felt. Dissolves the fear root and you radiate contentment, fearlessness. And finally, the last thing that I find commonly causes dysregulation, and it's directly related to that, is a lack of gratitude. Focusing on lack amplifies scarcity, threat. It sustains high cortisol, low vagal tone, and fuels resentment and irritability. So the solution is to build a gratitude habit. Daily, 3 things you're grateful for every single day. Write them in your journal. Drop into your heart when you're stuck in a negative, because gratitude interrupts and even flips complaints. Thank your body. Tell others what you're appreciative of, what you're grateful for. Just 1 to 2 minutes a day, and it will lead to, increased dopamine and serotonin boost. Extra heart coherence and lower cortisol and increased resilience in the weeks ahead. The default lens equals natural regulation. So be sure to be grateful for all the blessings in your life. So we've covered a lot. The physical foundations, sleep, breath, movement, diet, nature, light, the inputs we consume. The mental layers, clarity, beliefs, self-talk, perception, control, love, gratitude. But here's the truth. Nervous system work isn't just another tool, it's the foundation. If your body doesn't feel safe, then no therapy, supplement, diet, or mindset hack fully lands. You can't heal a body still braced for danger. But when you regulate through these simple, consistent shifts, you do create the conditions for healing to become biological. Inevitably, inflammation dials down, immunity strengthens, hormones balance, digestion opens, blood flow to healing tissue increases. You're not broken, you're protected. The price of constant protection is often chronic stress, anxiety, fatigue, or illness. So the real question isn't which method worked, it's what finally helped my nervous system stop bracing. That's where transformation happens. So experiment with what works, for you. What works for one person won't necessarily work for someone else. Notice what brings you calm and attach it to your routines. Your morning breath, evening nature, protein breakfast, gratitude journal, whatever it is. Small daily consistency compounds. So watch what you chew, aka food, media, music, whatever it is. Do what you need to do, things like movement, breath, somatics, and always live true, things like clarity and love and gratitude. That's the fastest path from dysregulation to regulation. You're not chasing fixes, you're becoming the safest place your body knows. Your nervous system is wise, so give it what it needs and it will do the extraordinary work of repair and harmony. You've got this. So let me know, how consistently do you practice self-regulation to manage your emotions, thoughts, and behaviors? Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to learn more about the other essential attributes of staying in your best shape. And until next time, watch what you chew, do what you need to do, and always live true.